This is Dave Meltzer with Entrepreneurs, the Playbook. I have RJ Pittman, CEO of Matterport, here with me, and we are going to get into Tech 4.0. RJ, welcome to the Playbook.
Great to be here, David. Thanks for having me.
You know, I'm going to start off because a lot of people may or may not know Matterport, but let's get a little bit of background on how the company has evolved and where you are today.
Sure. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary a few weeks ago. So we're entering our second decade of growth. It's been an exciting journey for sure. And what Matterport does essentially is with our technology, we turn any building, any physical space into its digital twin. So what is that? Yeah, what is a digital twin? It's a three-dimensional carbon copy of a building, of a home, a hotel, even a high-rise that you can explore in a virtual set. So if you've ever experienced a virtual tour on the internet when you're looking at real estate or a home to buy, most likely that is a Matterport digital twin.
And considering that real estate's the largest asset class in the world, which is why I've always focused in on it, and that being a lawyer as well, that our laws, believe it or not, are all to protect the landowner. Real estate's such an important part of our economy worldwide. And now that, our technology has exceeded the traditional aspects of the institutions that have built real estate. So insurance, finance, all the different areas, this really creates a whole new opportunity to buy, sell, finance, appraise, every single aspect of real estate that took a long time traditionally and built these institutions that if my numbers aren't wrong, it's valued of over $230 trillion as an asset class.
That's right.
I may be underestimated because things have been going up lately.
Yeah. I think the number is in need of an update for sure, especially in the last 2 years.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Totally.
What are some of the nuances, the subtleties when we're talking about digital twins? Because I imagine that Matterport not only works with real estate, but the technology probably creates digital twins of other, CAD type of assets.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things to kind of put in perspective here. What we're talking about is the digitization of ... right? And if you think about the technology industry over the last few decades, one of the things that we see that's been so powerful and it's been repeated in huge markets time and again is the digital transformation, right? You look at a company like Google, what did they do? They led the digital transformation of information, put it all online, made it searchable, universally accessible, right? Look at PayPal, they digitized money, completely transformed how we transact, right? And of course, you can look at the internet and the web at large and how it digitized retail, another $1 trillion category, right? And created this thing called e-commerce. And out of that, were born some $1 trillion companies like Amazon, right? No surprise, just how big the unlock is. And when you look at the physical, asset class of real property, it's bigger than all of those industries, bigger than all of those asset classes. I mean, in just putting that 230 trillion in perspective, that's more than 3 times the value of all publicly traded stocks in the world. And it is sitting there, as you and I know, mostly in its physical form, what I say offline, right? So you can connect the dots here a little bit to see just how big, the opportunity and the transformation can be and the value that can be created, the companies and that will be born out of this and that are being born out of this, like Matterport, that can fundamentally not just change the game for the industry, but really for society at large. Because real estate isn't just, kind of a thing. This goes back, centuries, right? To the beginning of humanity, we've had real estate, right? And by the way, we're, Matterport's digitizing some of those things. So you asked about what else are we digitizing? We've done the pyramids in Egypt, in fact, most recently, a pharaoh's tomb was discovered by archaeologists that has not been seen by humanity in literally thousands of years. And guess what? They happen to have a Matterport enabled camera on hand, and they Matterported the tomb. And it's the only way that, that we in society will ever be able to see this, incredible piece of history, thousands of years old, because it's not open to the public. Right. And it's literally as good as being there, when you create these, capture these digital experiences. And that gives you kind of an idea of just how far you can, take a technology like ours, because it's a platform. It's not intended to, be a one trick pony or something that works only in very specific physical environments. It's really meant to, capture a digital copy of the world around us.
It's so interesting because I started my career out of law school in the very same space, obviously in 1992. The idea of not only digital form and formats and platforms, but also the idea of datafication. And I'll explain, I worked for a company called Westlaw. We digitized all the laws of America. And we sold for $3.4 billion in 1995, which may be equal to or greater than $1 trillion today. I'm not quite sure, but it could be. It could be. But one of the interesting things is that we talked about, digitizing the books and all the different savings and conveniences and power of it, but tying in the datafication of being an understanding that when we digitize something, it now becomes data itself. In fact, in 1999, I ended up being the CEO of Samsung's first phone division with the world's first data device, the world's first convergence device, they called it. Later, it was a Windows CE device. So I worked with Microsoft and all different companies, but they later called them smartphones. But even the big carriers, Verizon had just switched over from LA Cellular, and there was Sprint PCS. They did not understand voice was already data. Right? They own just the common nomenclature, the common understanding of datafication and digitization were so archaic that people didn't understand the relativity and connectivity between when we digitize something, we now make it relative to the data and we make it accessible to the data. We make it analytical to the data. We make it learning capable of that data. And it seems to me that Matterport has created a platform to transcend where I was in 1992, almost 30 years ago, not to date myself, but I'm sure if you're watching this, not listening to it, you can imagine it was definitely 30 years ago. How has that evolved the importance of understanding anything that becomes digital now becomes datafied?
Yeah, well, it's really the core of, I think, first of all, the existence of our future is data. And specifically how we analyze that data, how we interrogate it, and the insights that we can draw from it are extraordinarily powerful. And look, I went to school, I went to church at the house of Google. In some of its storming and forming years back in 2007, I was running product for a number of the common search products that you use today, like Google News, Google Image Search, Google Video, now YouTube. And I can tell you, I would say the most interesting and powerful thing about Google was at stage one of its business was how incredibly scalable their system was at collecting and crawling all of the information out there in the world. That was really, to get a leapfrog over all of the search engines that came before it was, how far and wide, could your collection of information be, or your capture of information be? Then once you have all of that information, what do you do with it? Right? How can you transform just these, the sea of information into something that's useful? And, you might say, well, that's the search engine. Well, that's just the beginning of it, right? These other things like Google News and image search and video and such are all born out of, the evolution of organizing. It's really the evolution of that datafication, right? And empowering because what Google sees, and certainly what I see at Matterport, is the whole is far greater than the sum of the parts, right? There's 2 billion websites out there in the world, and they're all very interesting. but it's exponentially more valuable when you bring it all together and you can organize it, and slice and dice it in a lot of different ways, depending on what your objectives are as a user that, shows up to the website. And in Matterport's world, there's 4 billion buildings in the world today, twice as many websites, which in itself is kind of a head scratcher if you think about it. Like, how do they all fit on the planet? And we're adding 13,000 new buildings to Earth every day. So, put that in perspective as well. And so what we're setting out to do is, we now have over 6 million buildings and spaces that have been digitized on the Matterport platform. And we think about it the same way, which is the whole of this. What do we do when you have all of this information about every physical space and building in the world? The potential and the opportunity is just enormous. And, when we get to it, I'm happy to share a few examples of what that looks like, but it's game-changing stuff.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to those examples next because, I have a philosophy that is aligned with Matterport, and it's called a stage theory, that we have a stage now. And I think Shakespeare had it right originally, right? The whole world is our stage. And so if you believe the whole world is a stage, then it's our duty to capture what's on the stage, modify it, amplify it, and perpetuate it for access. And so you're democratizing
That's right.
the access to the stage. And now our whole world is the stage. So what are some of those examples of how we've been able, and with Matterport, to democratize access to, this game-changing, digital twin technology that, to me, aligns with how I brand people? I said, look, buy a billboard. It's much less expensive than creating a video. And they're like, what are you talking about? I said, because you can have all the access to the cars, but the minute you create a video of the billboard, you now get both. Right? You've created it costs too much to create what's in the billboard. You might as well just buy the billboard, create the video from the billboard. Now you're capturing, modifying, accessing, and perpetuating and democratizing it. How are you guys doing that with Matterport?
It's very, very interesting way that you talk about it. So there's two ends of the spectrum. One is when we think about, democratizing, Matterport, there's one part of it, which is, again, using a little bit of the Google analogy. Well, first, how do we capture all of the buildings and get them all digitized, right? And a big breakthrough that I brought to the company about a year ago is something we call Matterport for iPhone, right? So historically, the way that we really, built this business was around a suite of hardware. We have a very sophisticated pro-level capture device. We call it the Pro 2 camera, right? We invented this 10 years ago in Silicon Valley. It's a powerful capture device that, just to throw a few specs at you, 134 megapixel 4K HDR imagery, but it also has depth sensors on board that can capture millions of 3D data points simultaneous with, an extraordinary photographic fidelity that we then synthesize almost in real time to create, the 3D model of, the space or the building of any size. I mean, we've done, IKEA showroom warehouses that are 700,000 square feet in size. We've created a digital twin of all the way down to, a boutique shop, on High Street in London. And, but it's, in the early days of Matterport, that rig and that setup, took some learning, and, you had to shell out a few $1,000s to get in the game. And a lot of people got into the game because the solution was so powerful, but I wanted to do something transformative that really reached, the world over. And so I knew that we had to strip away any complexities and, special technology and just get it in the hands of everybody. And so the idea now is, by using your phone in the same way that you take, like a panoramic photo and you kind of just wave it across a great view, and if you're out on the islands on vacation, get that great long wide beach shot. I wanted to be able to use a motion like that would capture just enough visual information that I could send, to our software, which is we call it Cortex. It's a big AI engine that sits up in the Matterport cloud that can now just take visual imagery from a standard smartphone and iPhone and turn it into this dimensionally accurate 3D model, right? So suddenly we go from, hundreds of thousands of people armed with an actual Matterport camera, digitizing the world, to now anybody pulling out the phone in their pocket. Why take a photo? Why take a pano when now you can actually create, a 3D recreation of that moment?
It's amazing. And that leads me to my last question. There's so much applicable capability to Matterport, including, as everybody knows, the digital world of just World 2 and selling digital real estate and NFTs and utilizing blockchain and crypto, et cetera. But there's so many numerous sectors and industries that can utilize Matterport. How are you prioritizing when you have such a ubiquitous solution? How are you prioritizing which industries and sectors to move to next?
Yeah, we get really real and honest with ourselves about the magnitude of the value proposition, right? And I think any entrepreneur, any business leader should really think of it that way, because in the case of Matterport, we could get pulled in 1,000 different directions, right? And we might, but first of all, the power of a platform is it's self-service, right? So I didn't create a market to go after pyramids in Egypt or the restaurant in the Eiffel Tower, but we created a platform that lets anybody take the technology, and deploy it anywhere. So I'll let that happen. That's nice and scalable. But the things where we invest, Matterport's team, time, and energy is based on that value prop, right? And so I'll just rattle off a few. We've been doing this for 10 years. So we got a lot of data on why Matterport, right? And in real estate, properties sell 30% faster and for 10% higher price if you have a Matterport digital twin attached to your listing. Homes, vacation rentals, even commercial properties. In the nightly rental category, VRBO, Airbnb, HomeAway, and hotels all over the world. We have thousands of hotels that have Matterported their properties and tens of thousands of Airbnbs. If you have a Matterport digital twin of your property, we move occupancy 14 to 18%. I mean, it pays for itself in like the first week if you have the technology. Our technology is very inexpensive to deploy. And why is that? Well, because what everybody wants, especially in the nightly rental category, is photos don't tell the whole story. They want to know, gee, is the dining room and the family room going to be large enough to hold, a family reunion if we invite everybody over for a big cookout? Well, photos might give you a sense of it, but with Matterport, you can actually go in with our little digital tape measure. You can walk through the house virtually, and you can actually measure it as an example. So this notion of giving you buyer confidence or guest confidence or purchasing, renting confidence is a very similar characteristic that we spent a lot of time on in the world of e-commerce, trying to help, drive conversion and, grow digital businesses online and digital retail online. The same applies in this category. And we've been marching across a number of verticals that, I'll go out to one more, because, we talk a lot about real estate. Think of a Matterport digital twin as the next generation appraisal. Everybody has to get an appraisal when you're buying and selling a house or a building, and it's a pain in the ass and it's expensive. But guess what? It's not worth the paper that it's written on, right? It's somebody who comes along, maybe takes a few photos with their smartphone now and measures a few things by hand and pulls some county records, and you're done. And it leaves so much to the imagination. And with a Matterport capture, we've captured every corner of the building. It's accurate down to a centimeter or millimeter, including the condition of all of the contents in the property. So if you're an insurance company underwriting, a policy for the property, you're a mortgage company underwriting, a new loan on the property, you want the Matterport digital twin as your system of record, right? It's amazing to me that, since the dawn of buildings in humanity, that we don't have a better system of record for the most valuable asset in the world. It hasn't evolved one bit since the early days, and we saw that as a gigantic, value proposition. And so that's another example of, beyond being able to experience a space in a property as if you were there and touring it, It's actually that spatial data that we can provide, to the industry at large, that completely takes the risk out of, two giant categories of, real estate, financial services.
Wow. I will tell you, I bought two income properties with a digital twin technology of yours and furnished them as income properties from across the country. So I am living
Love it.
proof that there's a quantitative value to what you do. And despite you being a Wolverine, despite you proving once again why Stanford didn't let me in, I'm glad they didn't, because I would have got all A's in graduate school if I was with guys like you. RJ Pittman, incredible, changing the world and the digital second world, the twin world that maybe someday we all will be monetizing as well as the real world. But as soon, obviously, there is a quantitative value to the exact duplication tied to data. Thank you so much.